The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that people in the Bronx have a bit of a chip on their shoulders. There's a feeling that our needs are not addressed and no one really listens to our concerns and what we have to say. Well, Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. is making an attempt to change that. He's issued a wellness and quality of life survey in an attempt to identify problems and issues and also good developments and solutions to the problems that Bronxites are concerned about. But in order to ensure success of the data collected, the borough president needs to hear from as many Bronxites as possible. So tonight we thought we'd help him out a bit in his quest to get many of us involved, and we're going to fully investigate the survey and even fill one out right here on the air. A little different sort of a show tonight that will take our talk into different aspects of life in the Bronx. But you can weigh in with questions or comments by calling in at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a different edition of our show. Please join me in welcoming the Borough President's Chief of Staff, Paul Del Duca. Thank you for joining us.
How are you, Gary?
I'm just fine, and the Director of Policy is Ray Sanchez. Ray, thank you for joining us. We were kidding beforehand, but Paul, you're always behind the scenes. Today you're out in front and representing the man who you work for. Tell me a little bit about this survey. Why and what is the idea behind it?
Well, philosophically, the idea of happiness has always been something that I have been intrigued by, and how you qualitatively and quantitatively come to a conclusion in terms of defining happiness. So when the borough president was in the state assembly, and as you know, Gary, I was with him the entire time, whenever we looked at legislation, we always looked at the idea of the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people, and that legislation should be aimed towards that goal. In fact, in moral philosophy, it's called utilitarianism, and Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill were the ones who spearheaded the idea. In modern times, you'll find that there are folks all around the world who are talking about the concept in very concrete terms. In fact, the idea of gross national happiness is something that is measured in Bhutan, as opposed to gross domestic product. So this kind of economics is a form of economic behavioralism. And I think that it is a fascinating way to inform public policy.
I must tell you, I'm taken aback by your answer, because I was prepared, because you are the chief of staff of the chief elected official of the Bronx, to get a general political answer, but I got a very strong philosophical foundation for not only this survey, but the borough president's agenda, or his focus on what he's about. For viewers who are saying, "Wow, that's what." So that's really the fund. Survey aside, that is a fundamental precept that you and the borough president have been talking about for years, since even he was in the assembly.
For 16 years now, we've been talking about it. It's commonly referred to as the felicity principle.
You caught me off guard, and so. One for the chief of staff of the borough president, that I better, to get my political answer, I better move over to the director of policy. With the results that you get,
yes,
will this affect policy? How will it affect policy? Do you have a clue on that kind of thing?
Absolutely, Gary. There's three different ways where we will look to use the feedback we receive on the survey to shape our actions in the office, whether it's through capital allocations, whether it's through legislation we do at the city council or at the state level or even at the federal level, or also through programming through our office. We have our education summit that's coming up later this month here at Lehman College. And so there's many different facets in which we'll use the feedback on the survey to shape policy and the way we act as a staff.
In creating the survey, and I know anytime, frankly, and we just saw an example of it right at the top of the show, when I ask a question, I have a sense of what I'm going to get back, and many times, frankly. When you created the survey, did you have a sense of what you're going to get back? Did you have a sense of, gee whiz, I know that people are concerned about education or jobs or things like that, so you couch it a certain way to get feedback on those topics?
Absolutely not. We thought this was a good time to do the survey for a number of reasons. One of them being that the census just came out, so we have brand new data on economics, socioeconomics, racial, demographics of the borough. But given the fact that we have a fairly young administration, it's a good time to take a step back and look about how do Bronxites feel about their borough and the direction it's going in. I think so many people have these misconceived notions of what it means to be a Bronxite or what it means to live in this borough or work in this borough, and it was more than time for Bronxites to take ownership of that perception and then just say, you know what, the Bronx is a great place to work and live. Whether it's at Montefiore, whether it's at Fordham, whether it's at the courthouses, whether it's in so many different places where you could work and have high quality of life in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to capture that.
Or not capture that and find out that there are things that need to be worked on that you might not have.
Absolutely, it's because we know we have a strong pulse of the borough, so we have objective questions that we put into the survey, and we've been surprised, and some things have been affirmed as well.
Mm-hmm. Paul, in terms of the way I introduced the show, saying that Bronxites have a chip on their shoulder, things we kind of feel like a lot of times we're being overlooked, is this also a way to collect some data that will back up certain agendas or certain philosophical approaches to things that the borough president may want to do, to say, well, you know what, everybody's concerned about whether it be education or healthcare or housing, so therefore I'm showing you this is what our people want to do?
Most certainly. It never hurts in terms of formulating public policy to survey the public. You want to hear the public's opinions, and often in the political process, we are accused of not listening to the public. So you want to gather as much empirical data as you can so that you make informed choices. In fact, you're elected to do that. It's your obligation to do that. And so any means by which we can collect that data, we're making an attempt to utilize those means, whether it's through Facebook, whether it's through various different social networking activities, or through this survey.
You know, this is, again, you've launched us right into a whole philosophical discussion. Now, I've had discussions on this program with many elected officials, including certainly Mr. Diaz, probably more, and we know that he's been on the show more than just about anybody else. And one of the questions that has come up, not only on this show, but any talk show with elected officials, is the whole notion of is a policy decision based on a popularity vote. And sometimes elected officials have to see, well, that's what a lot of people are saying, but I believe what's right or what needs to be done is different from what the numbers in that way may show. How do you couch what you're gathering here versus something like that?
Well, Gary, you just framed a classic argument, and that argument is formulated as such. Is an elected official a delegate or a trustee? When an elected official is considered a delegate, by definition, that person has been elected to represent the thoughts or sentiments of the people whom elected him or her. When you are elected to be a trustee, you are elected as a trustee to use your own judgment. And you were elected because the people who elected you believe that you have the wisdom to create public policy of your own accord. So this is a very classic argument, and where any particular elected official falls on either side of that equation, I think really has to do with context and the matter at hand. And so in different areas of public policy, it makes a lot more sense to listen to how people feel about a particular subject. In other areas, it makes a lot more sense to utilize your own background and experience when making a decision.
When I said off air that we were going to really try and fill out one of these, Mr. Del Duca was like, oh, you're not going to do that. But I think it will be interesting to see in what areas you might say, gee, if people answer a certain way, we might, I don't want to say override it, but we'll take it into consideration, but move into, into another realm. Let's do this, because normally we take phone calls a little later, but I really do want to take a look at the survey. So let's go to the telephone right now and say hi to our buddy Mark from Pelham Parkway. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Gary, gentlemen, I've been away for a couple of weeks. I haven't been able to call in.
I'm going to
But I've got to tell you, since you're doing the survey, I think I'll tell you my views of what I think is wrong with the Bronx. First of all, I say Ruben is doing a hell of a job. But again, he's limited by what the city allows.
Well, there he is. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
But I think...
Start again, because we didn't hear you.
Okay. You couldn't hear me, and I
don't hear you again.
So I couldn't hear with you guys. First, I think Ruben's been doing a hell of a job.
We're not hearing him, so he may be on the air, but we'll get back to him. So Ray, let's. Are we ready to do this? You ready
Absolutely.
To do it? What is the website? And Jane and Michael up there, let's put the website up. What is the website that people can find the survey?
They can go right to our website. It's featured very prominently in a large green button.
On the Borough President's website?
Absolutely, bronxbp.nyc.gov. And what's great about it is that, they can click straight through, or we also have it in Spanish as well. So there's two versions of the survey prominently featured on our website.
Okay. Do we have Mark now, or should I work right away with the website, Jane? Just tell me which you would rather I do. All right, I'm going with the website because we didn't hear back. So the first one that's right there is how old are you? And I'm going to fill this out. Now, I already did it, but I'm going to fill it out again. So the choices are how old are you? I am over 51, so they're going to click that. And let's move to the next question. Are you a resident of the Bronx? Scroll down there, my friends, running the camera. Yes, I am a resident of the Bronx. I am not, you can pick any zip code you want. I'm not going to give you my personal zip code. Are you currently employed? Some people watch this show and they may have certain opinions of that, but yes, in fact, I do have a job. If yes, do you work in the Bronx? And the answer is yes. Zip code of my employer, we're going to skip. If you are a Bronx resident, what neighborhood and community board do you live in? I will tell you that I do live in Community Board 8, so I will do that. If you live in the Bronx, how many years have you resided here? For me, it's more than 20. So we're going to go down more than 20. Do you rent or own your own home or apartment? For me, on this show, I'm going to leave that out. It's nobody's business what I do. You guys can have it in your survey, but it's not here. I am married. My wife would want to make sure that I note that, which is in fact true, proudly. I have children, which I asked. Are my children enrolled in a New York City public school? My children are not, because they both have graduated from New York City public schools. Now, how would you rate the Bronx as a place to live? Excellent, good, fair, or poor? I find this to be a very challenging question. And one of the values, and maybe Paul, you can weigh in on this, one of the values of this not only was for me to read the survey and fill out the survey, but it made me look at myself and how I feel about the Bronx. I assume that's one of the agendas here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how would I rate the Bronx as a place to live? We know there are issues. For me, it's been a good place. It's not been excellent. There are issues that come up that I can't control, but I have lived here by choice, so I can't say it's fair or poor. It's a good place. How would I rate it as a place to work? For the same reasons, a good place to work. Is the Bronx quality of life moving in the right direction? Boy, you guys ask tough questions. That is I found it a very difficult question to answer, because there are many things that upset me about being in the Bronx. On the other hand, I'm always hopeful. I wonder what my friends who are watching TV would answer right now. And that's why we're doing this, because I want you to fill out the survey yourself and do that. I'm going to say we are moving in the right direction, because I am a hopeful person, and the people around the table are working their tails off every day to make that happen. So I'm going right direction on that. These are just fascinating questions to me. Things have gotten better or worse in the Bronx over the last 5 years. Wow. I'm going to actually say Oh, I don't. It's the much better, the same, or worse. And I'm hoping people are thinking about that. I'm going to say the same, and I'm sorry to say that. Did I hear somebody groan upstairs when I said that? How do you feel things will be in the Bronx over the next 5 years? I am a hopeful, optimistic person, and I'm doing what I can. I know the people around me, so I'm going to say better. Okay. All right?
All right. Fair enough.
I think when we get to number 20, we're going to stop and just ask you a couple of questions, and we'll try to see if we can get Mark again. If you live in the Bronx, what is your overall outlook on life? I am a positive person, and so I will definitely say it's positive. I always believe in the good things. If you live in the Bronx, would you move to another neighborhood in the Bronx? I would answer maybe. I mean, there's nobody insisting that I live where I currently live. I'm satisfied where I live, but you never know what's going to happen. I would certainly consider that. And number 20, I will say, are you registered to vote? I am, in fact, registered to vote. Have you been monitoring the results of the survey yet? What have you found so far? Is there anything to report, or we're too soon to report? What do you find?
No, we're actually very pleased with the enthusiasm in which Bronxites have responded to the survey. We have over 1,300. We're on pace for 1,300 respondents this week.
This week, 1,300?
No, since we've opened.
Since the beginning, okay.
So we've had 1,300 respondents, which is more than a sizable sample size as well. We've had 150 surveys inputted manually, so people have been mailing the paper version of the survey into us. People have been taking it active in community boards. People have been coming to pick them up, take them to their local communities to have them and bringing them back for us.
So some people are doing it online, others are getting it through there, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
And then you're transposing the written data. Paul, is it time to tell us about a couple of trends? Did they respond? Whether they think the Bronx is doing better or worse yet, or are we not saying that till you get all the data? Give me something about the content of what you've seen so far.
Well, number 18, if you live in the Bronx, what is your overall outlook on life? That's, for me and for Ray and for the borough president, a very intriguing question. And the answer has been overwhelmingly positive. And it's interesting because when you
That's inspiring, I must tell you.
Yes, when you look at the choices, you've got positive, negative, confident, insecure, indifferent, and undecided. So what we actually do when we gather the data is we combine the positive and confident as one number. So when you combine those...
It's interesting because I was going to say confident as well, but go ahead.
Right. So when you combine those, I think we've wound up with almost 70%.
Wow.
It's very high.
And that's an extraordinary number because we all know there are issues. We know there's poverty. We know there's health issues. We know there's housing. We all know what the issues are. We talk about them on this show every week. But yet, the spirit of the people of the Bronx pierces right through. I mean, that's a proper conclusion if the numbers continue in that direction.
Absolutely.
All right, we try Mark. Let's do Mark from Pelham Parkway. Now, Mark, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
We can. Go ahead. What do you got?
Excellent. Hey, Gary, gentlemen.
Yes.
I got to tell you, my attitude when I'm looking at those questions, and I didn't know there was this survey, so I will go online after I'm done with you guys on my iPad and take the survey. Yes. But I do have some comments to make. I think Ruben has been trying to do a hell of a job. And I know Ruben since he's been an assemblyman.
Okay.
The problem I have, he's one man against the system. And if you look at how the Bronx has been dumped on, everything from the filtration plant to Yankee Stadium fiasco with the parkland, it was just revealed that $250 million that the city was supposed to give for the parks, they barely given $130 million.
You don't have to review all that. We know what it is. Get to your point.
Well, my point is this. It's hard to stay positive. I'm positive because I'm in a position where I run up to Montreal. I have housing up in Montreal. And if I see the Bronx and the city itself and the quality of life in the city, the way it hammers you every day, and most politicians, and I say this, do not really care about their constituents.
Okay, so your point, let me just summarize. Your point is that the borough president is one man, and yet many of the factors that dictate some of the issues that you're talking about are coming down from other places that he might not control.
Exactly, he has no control. Look what they did with us in the snowstorm last year.
Mark, I do want to tell you that the band that you recommended to us is going to be featured on our anniversary show next week. So
well, Gary, since you did the plug, let me give a plug. If you would have asked me a year ago if I was
going to Mark, no time for plugs. Thank you very much. Cut him off. Thank you. Cut him off. Goodbye. Thank you, Mark. What's your thought about that, Mr. Del Duca, about the idea that the borough president is, after all, without any legislative authority, and he is only one man, and so you get all this data, so what?
Well, I, with all due respect, I believe that Mark is underestimating the influence of the office of the borough president. One of the things that you just pointed out was the notion of legislative authority. The living wage bill that is being hotly debated in the city of New York right now was introduced at the behest of the borough president. If you look at the city charter, each borough president has the authority to introduce legislation. When you really take a serious look at the powers of the borough president, there are many things there that a borough president can do to influence public policy in the city of New York that most people aren't cognizant of and don't realize. And one of the things that we did, Gary, when we arrived in Borough Hall, is we immediately made an analysis of what those powers were, and we've been attempting to utilize them to the best of our ability.
Let's go back to the survey. So we were up to number 21. And we're going to move kind of quick. Here we go. When was the last time you voted? I voted in 2010. Can you name your elected officials? I can name my elected officials, and frankly, they've all been on the show sitting across the table in front of me. This, to me, was the section that I found fascinating. Which area needs the biggest improvement for the wellness and quality of life in the Bronx to approve? Education, schools, economic development, jobs, housing, crime, public safety, environment, example, pollution, air quality, healthcare, homelessness, transportation, sanitation, or other. And then the three columns are top priority, second priority, and third priority. I had a terrible time with this. I wanted to check like the top 10, all top priority. Ray, could you tell me about the creation of this question and what kind of that same question I asked you before, what you're looking to get out of this, and how can you choose between whether crime is more important than education?
Well, that's a great question. And the reality is that when whether you're an executive, whether you're a legislature, there's always an opportunity cost for every dollar spent. Every time you spend a dollar doing X, you're choosing not to do Y, because it's a finite number of resources available. So we wanted to make sure that when we're making our capital allocations, whether there were any kind of funding choices from our office, we wanted to make sure that we had some sort of data to make sure that our choices in the future reflected the priorities of Bronxites. And our borough president, for example, has led that by the amount of money he's put towards education.
So even as difficult as it would be for me or maybe others in the Bronx to make a choice, you would like them to get a sense so you know what is top priority. Because to me, I mean, I can't determine whether education is more important than jobs now, personally. So I don't know what I did for that one. All right, go back to the. Go ahead. Did you want to respond?
Yes, because one of the things when you ask your questions, it's important to not really have a popularity contest, but to the best of our ability, do a needs-based analysis, and that was really one of the many goals of the survey.
All right, let's go back to the survey. There's so much more to do, and of course they said you're not getting through the whole thing, and they were right. I'm not going to answer, of course, about my income. We want to do priority, so I'll put education and jobs as the second priority, and I'll tell you, I sometimes feel housing is the top priority, but I'll put that as third. They give you A, B, and C. I'm all right. I'm doing all right here, Paul, right? Okay, they asked me, he's not telling me how to answer. Then they scroll down, keep going. What is your household income? I'm not going to respond here. The job market in the Bronx is excellent, good, fair, or poor. I'm going to say poor, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but that is how I feel. You're happy with your current level of income. I would assume everybody's going to say, I want more money. Who knows? Did you get a lot of people to say they wanted more? I assume.
Right.
Divulge?
All right. Does your income cover your basic expenses and cost of living? That's an interesting thing. This next one, number 28, if we can get to it, just scroll down. I'm moving kind of quickly. How would you rate the public schools in the Bronx? The elementary schools, the middle schools, the high schools, and public colleges. It's a little bit difficult for me to break them down because I'm not directly involved in them. So I'm not, at this moment, I forgot what I put on the survey. That is going to be a wonderful piece of information, don't you think, Paul?
Absolutely.
Do you have a trend yet or anything you want to say about that, Ray, of what you've seen so far?
I will say that the CUNY schools are doing very well in terms of...
CUNY schools, people like the CUNY schools.
They're getting a good response.
Okay. was a political answer. He did very well. Do you feel that the New York City Department of Education is responsive to the concerns of Bronx parents? We're not going to have time to go through all of it. There's a question about special ed, et cetera, questions about financial aid, rating the public parks, rating the recreation centers, rating the libraries. Would you consider your neighborhood safe? These are all a part of it. What should be done to increase safety? I must say, for people in the Bronx, I think this would be almost a relief to have somebody say, you know what, this is what I think about my neighborhood. Let me just see. Oh, here was the question that I wanted to raise, which, boy, is there ever a loaded policy question behind it. It's number 46. Would you pay to drive to Manhattan if you were assured the funds were being utilized to improve mass transit? Boy, is this ever a loaded question referring to congestion pricing. Before I ask my question, Mr. Del Duca, does the borough president have a position on congestion pricing?
Well, when we were in the assembly, the borough president was very clearly against imposing any form of toll on the people of New York.
So this question is couched, would you pay to drive in Manhattan if you were assured the funds were being utilized to improve mass transit? I almost feel like it's couched a certain way, but then when I think of it, it's kind of pretty fair and balanced. They're both looking at me. Any thoughts on that, Ray, about the creation of that question? Were you stuffing the ballot, so to speak?
We were not stuffing the ballot. If you look at the borough president's track record on looking for LEED certified buildings and making the Bronx a greener, more sustainable place, that's one of the kind of the drives of that question.
We're out of time. Where do we find the survey?
Again, on our website,
the
Bronx.
Borough Presidents, Google Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., and it'll come right up.
Absolutely.
And it costs nothing to fill it out. There were some zip codes you're concerned about that people in particular should fill it out?
Absolutely. Our goal is to have as representative and a sample size as possible. So we're really hoping that if you're in community boards 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, that's Fordham, Mont Haven, Concourse Village, Melrose, that
got it.
Please.
We got to get those people, because those in many cases are the people who need the most services. This is their chance to stand up and be counted. Paul Del Duca, Ray Sanchez from the Borough President's Office, thank you so much. Folks, we're just about out of time. I knew we were going to run out of time. So I'll just tell you, you can check BronxNet.org for our archives. Next week, as I mentioned earlier, our 17th anniversary, and we're going to be doing a music show with a fabulous Bronx rock and roll band. And so you got to join us for that. And so that's it. Good night. Fill out the survey. It's real important for all of us that you do that. Okay? Have a good night.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.